All right, today we're going to do a shortage, price ceiling, surplus, price floor cheat sheet. It's going to end up looking like this. You need a sheet of paper, you need a regular writing utensil, pen or pencil, and then two different colors of writing utensils. So color pencils or markers, something from my stash up front is perfectly fine. So you can turn it horizontal, landscape, or vertical portrait, whatever you want to do. If you want to do front, back, you can do it that way. But basically, this is what we're going to end up with. I'm going to do one side at a time. Okay, so I'm going to focus first on shortage and price ceiling. Go ahead and give that side, whatever you decide that side is, a color, not a color, I'm sorry, a title. And I'm going to make it this purpley color. So my shortage and price ceiling is going to be this purpley color. Okay. So in this scenario, in shortage and price ceiling, they are very similar to each other with some slight differences in government involvement. So we start out with a base graph. We're eventually going to draw 4 of these where we've got price on the y-axis, quantity on the x-axis, upward sloping supply, downward sloping demand, with an equilibrium, price equilibrium, and quantity equilibrium. And it's really important that all 4 of your base graphs end up like that. We're going to start by describing what a shortage is. So let's make this a shortage graph. Okay, and a shortage occurs because the price of the good drops, not because of supply or demand changing, but it kind of like artificially drops in a way, okay? So the way that we graph this is we take the price, no changes to supply or demand, it stays the same. We take the price and we just pick a lower price, price 1. And from there we go over with a dashed line, and that is our new price for this good. But there's been no changes in supply and demand, and so it causes an issue. Where price hits the 2 supply and demand curves, you put a new dot. And these dots represent disequilibrium, meaning that we are not, our current economic state is not at equilibrium when it has to do with this good because the price was artificially dropped. From those disequilibrium points, you follow your dotted lines down. Okay? Now, what disequilibrium do we encounter first? The price line hits supply first. So when we follow that down, we're going to call that the quantity supplied. Okay? Then the price line hit the demand curve, and we put that disequilibrium point there. We follow it down, and we call that quantity demanded. Okay? So in this scenario, if this is a number line, okay, quantity demanded is further along the number line than quantity supplied. That means that quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied. And that's what a shortage is. It is when we demand, we want more than what there is. Okay? So here's our equilibrium point where we should be, but our 2 disequilibrium points are already kind of shown on the graph. Then we color in, and that portion of the graph, the coloring is the best part in my opinion, that portion of the graph is the shortage, okay? So it means that this amount of goods, if this were a number, this amount of goods is how many goods short we are. At the current supply and demand, we should be supplying and demanding this amount, but in fact, we're demanding more than what is supplied. And so this creates a shortage. And so you can either figure that out on the graph by looking at quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied. Well, that means that there's more than what's on the shelf. There's more demand than what is supplied, than what's on the shelf. Or you can just remember, here's equilibrium, and we are below equilibrium, so we're short some. Is that how I remember it? Okay? So that's shortage. Let's do the exact same thing, but when the government does it, it's called a surplus. So draw a blank graph at the bottom underneath shortage. Oh, sorry, not surplus, price ceiling. Underneath shortage, blank graph, fill in the blank scenario, and then we're going to make this one a little bit different. So write out this definition. This one is going to be called price ceiling. So in this scenario, we're going to be looking at a price ceiling. Okay, and why does a price ceiling happen? When the government decreases the price of an item. So it's an artificial decrease. It's not based on supply and demand. The government just says this item's price has got to go down, okay? And we'll just do some silly scenarios in class, like the government decides that stuffed animals need to be less expensive, just like silly stuff like that. But in the notes, we had some real life examples. So go ahead and fill out kind of like this definition as well. When the government mandates a lower price, it causes a permanent shortage that will not fix itself. So we're going to, again, take that price and set a price line below. Follow that price line all the way over and find your points of disequilibrium. We hit that point and go down. That point of disequilibrium is quantity supplied. We hit this point and go down, and that point of disequilibrium is quantity demanded. And so if we were to look at this like a number line, it is the same. Quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied. There is more demand than what is supplied. Where should we be? Where supply and demand meet, at equilibrium. And once we kind of see our equilibrium and then 2 points of disequilibrium, we can start coloring that in. And this is different. This is different than a shortage. It's a permanent shortage because the government is not going to let us go above that ceiling. And the way you can remember that is you can just memorize a government mandated lower price is a price ceiling. You can take a look at this, know this is where we're supposed to be and we're short of that, but the government changed it. But the only thing different on this graph is we point to the ceiling and we call it a price ceiling so that we can differentiate it from just a regular natural shortage. This is a permanent artificial shortage put forth by the government. And as you can tell, we can remember it's called a price ceiling because doesn't this kind of look like a little house and we're pointing to the ceiling? This shaded in area represents that permanent shortage, okay? So that's our whole left side. Go ahead and fill in a blank graph for the whole right side. You can pause the video if you need to. All right, I'm going to choose a color. I'm probably going to do green for surplus and price floor, okay? So, blank graph, we're going to have two of them. We're going to have a surplus graph and a price floor graph. Let's do surplus graph. We're going to graph what a surplus looks like, and the word surplus means more than. So there's more than what we need or want. And a surplus happens because price goes up. Okay, so in this scenario, we've got our equilibrium price. Let's set a price above that, P1. Follow that price over with a dotted line, and you're going to create points of disequilibrium, where the price is different than what it should be based on supply and demand. So you put a dot where it encounters a supply or demand line, and follow that dot down. What line did that disequilibrium point land on? Demand, quantity demanded. The next place it lands is right here, supply, quantity supplied. And we go down and call that QS. So in this scenario, imagine that this is a number line, right? Quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded in that scenario. QS is greater than QD, and that's the definition of a surplus. There is more supplied, there is more available than what people are demanding. Why? Because it's too expensive. People don't want to buy it. The price went up. So we find our point of equilibrium where our economic reality should be. We find our points of disequilibrium already, and we get to color them in, which is the best part. So color that in, and that shaded area represents the number of goods that are in surplus that people, aren't buying because they don't like the price. It's too expensive. How can we remember that? We can just look at the number line, no quantity supply, greater than quantity demanded, that's a surplus. Or we can think, here's our point of equilibrium, but we've got goods above that. We have too many goods. That's surplus, okay? Now, that artificial increase in price that was beyond supply and demand, what if the government mandates that? That's what our price floor is going to be, okay? So, draw a blank graph, pause it if you need to, draw this fill in the blank and this definition, and let's get going. In this scenario, we're going to be doing a price floor, okay? Because the government decides that the price needs to increase. I'm so sorry, excuse me. So, in this scenario, the price goes up again, P1, but this time the government is forcing that price up. We draw a line all the way over. We hit our supply and demand curve, and those are our points of disequilibrium. Which one did we hit first? We hit demand, so we follow a dashed line down and call that QD, quantity demanded. The second one we hit was quantity supplied. We go down, label it quantity supplied. And if we look at our little number line, looks like quantity supplied is further along than quantity demanded. And that makes sense. It's the same as a surplus. But in this scenario, here is what is different. The government has mandated that price change. It will not fix itself. When the government mandates that higher price, it causes a permanent surplus. How do we know? We take a look at where we should be, which is equilibrium. We have 2 points of disequilibrium and we color them in. And when we figured out that disequilibrium, we figured out quantity supply was greater than quantity demanded. And it was the government's fault. So this surplus of goods is special. We're going to point to it and call it a price floor. And my little trick is here's the floor and you can't go beneath the floor. Like your price is not supposed to be down here. So this represents the number of goods that aren't being bought because the government has artificially raised the price. And that is shortage, price ceiling, surplus, price floor.